Living your life for God and prioritizing Him in your marriage can be uncomfortable, and it goes against the current of today's world.
So we created a podcast to talk practically about our marriage and family, because we may make a plan, but God is the one who directs our steps.
And that has led us here to Radical Direction. The following podcast is a ministry production of The Sevenfold. To find out more, go to thesevenfold.com. Hey everybody, welcome back to Radical Direction.
Welcome back.
We're really happy that you guys are here.
Yes.
If you did not catch episode 6 is talking about communication, unspoken expectations in your marriage, and all kinds of really great practical applications, tips, stories, etc. in that episode. So before you listen to today, if you have not listened to that one, please definitely go back and do that, because today we're talking about transparency, and that episode really sets a lot of the groundwork that you need in place in order to be really open and transparent and honest in your marriage with your spouse. And so that is something that really needs to be kind of like at least starting to put into practice before you get into transparency. So transparency, openness, honesty, vulnerability, not hiding things from each other.
There is no privacy with your spouse.
Yes, that is what we're talking about in this episode. So when you hear us talking about transparency or honesty or openness, all these things are synonymous in this course of this episode. And what Jacob just said there was there is no privacy with your spouse. That's something that Jacob and I firmly believe in. You should not have secrets from your spouse unless you are throwing them a surprise party, or you are planning.
And even then,
or you
that could cause your spouse to have some anxiety.
No.
Listen, I'm speaking from personal experience
People are allowed to have a surprise party if they're loved. You are allowed to keep a surprise gift from your spouse if you're planning a gift. But pretty much outside of that, something that is a help and a benefit and a love to them, you really should not have any privacy in your marriage.
Nope.
Everything should be out and open. Your spouse should be a safe place for you that you can open up your deep, dark secrets, like whatever you feel like is weighing heavy on you, your spouse is a safe place for that. A disclaimer at the beginning of this episode: if you feel like your spouse is not a safe place for you, if you feel like there is judgment, condemnation, you feel like that information is going to be used against you in the negative,
abuse.
If there's any kind of abuse in the relationship, emotional, psychological, physical, anything like that, we would really hope that right now you just go and seek professional help and counseling, and confide in a pastor or a very trustworthy friend or family member that can help you.
Yep.
So we just want to lay that disclaimer out right now. We are talking about this in the confines of a healthy, productive, safe marriage. So let that be clear. Yeah. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about in this is because, there are things that have weighed heavy on me at periods of time. And I felt like, oh my gosh, but if I tell Jacob, then he's going to think I'm a weirdo or that I'm just like broken and, all these things. But
I married a broken weirdo. It's fine.
But God has joined together. So the thing about that is that like, I'm not telling you that while you're still engaged, you need to like spill everything, but all of the important things should be out on the table before you get married. And then if there are little things that are like, oh, when I was younger, I did this and it was super stupid and whatever, like you shouldn't have anything that you keep from your spouse. You shouldn't have anything that comes up to your heart that you keep from your spouse. And I just want to like just jump straight into this episode and say that if you're married and you feel like something bubbles up to the surface, or you have a memory of something that kind of weighs on you or it bothers you, I personally think that that is an invitation from Holy Spirit to then share that with your spouse if it's not something that they know about. I can't tell you how many times that I have had something bubble up that I'm like, does Jacob know about that? And so I tell him, he's like, oh no, I didn't know. And then he just prays for me, and he is a safe place for me to share those thoughts and feelings. And then he knows that his wife is not perfect. I'm super flawed. I have all these things, but that also that I have baggage of kind of sins from my unsaved past that weigh on me that I don't like. And then that maybe creates an open, vulnerable place for him to share something with me. And so not only are you creating this openness between the two of you, you're also creating deeper intimacy and deeper trust and deeper love between the two of you, because you're understanding them better. You're able to pray for them better. You're able to understand the lens at which they look through certain situations with. It's really amazing.
And you've got to be able to be open about that. You have to be. I mean, there's just so many things that have happened into our lives before we've met our spouse.
Yeah.
Right. Even in that engagement period, things that continue to happen, you have to be willing to talk about it. Again, it ties into the communication. It ties into that silent decisions, right? All these previous episodes and things that we've talked about, right? But you have to be open.
Yeah.
And in the course of your life, what the enemy will want you to do is like, oh no, you've got to hide it because it's this embarrassing fact, or oh no, they would never, they divorce you if you even told them, right?
They'll never accept you.
Your spouse accepted you for who you were and are, right? Going into this, and they're in it with you, right? And again, they're your sounding board, right? So when something comes up, open up, talk to them, right? You can't, it's changing two things. One is that the light will be shining on that darkness, right? That area of your life that, you've kept private, nobody knows. It's like that, it's secret sin, right? And all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But your spouse is going to find out about it because they're going to join forces with you and say, no, let's fight and let's tackle this thing. Right. And then at the same time, you can't keep adding to that. You can't keep adding things and, sweeping more stuff on, into the closet under the rug,
Oh my
right?
gosh, yeah.
In your life, you have to be open. You can't be private about that, right? And I get, and sometimes that's like the sandpaper kind of rubbing kind of a thing going on with that. But you've got to be willing to open up and just be open and have constant openness with your spouse.
Yeah. One thing that makes Jacob and I particularly passionate about this in our marriage, and why we're passionate about it, talking about it with y'all, is because, for so many reasons, but one in particular is that there was something that Jacob struggled with. I don't think we were married yet when you told me, but he wouldn't tell me what it was, but he would be upset.
I know. I wonder what it was.
He would be like visibly, I'm not going to air out your dirty laundry.
Yeah, no, but that's just.
I am a safe place. So he did not want to tell me about it. He didn't want to tell me what it was. And I just kept feeling like something was off about that. And I was like, wow, this is a little weird, because he was clearly perturbed. And I kind of felt prompted by the Holy Spirit. You need to know what it's called. Like, you need to know what it is, or whatever the thing was that he struggled with. And he's like, no, I don't want to tell you. And he was really upset. Like, he was really uncomfortable, very uncomfortable by the thought of me knowing. And because it's also incredibly vulnerable to share those kinds of things with someone who, we were already engaged, and we had been engaged for a long time, but, it's still vulnerable, right? If you've never shared some of these things out loud for the first time, it's incredibly hard. And so he told me what it was, and immediately it's like a bubble popped in the atmosphere of where we were. It was like the weight lifted off his shoulders. He's like, oh. And the crazy thing about it is the Lord gave me this download in that moment, that the things that are unspoken, the devil uses those things to keep you in bondage. He uses those things to keep you, yes, exactly, torment. He keeps you in torment. In all of the ways that looks like, he keeps you in torment. So by you revealing that, by calling it by its name with your spouse, it just dropped this huge weight off of your shoulders. You were so relaxed, and like everything was so much better. And like, I'm not going to reject you. I had, Lord knows the things that I've done in my past, so I'm certainly not going to reject you for any of those kinds of things. It's not my place to judge, right? Like, I love you for who you are, and God He gave you to me. You're my gift. We are one. So like, if you're my soulmate, if you're my person that I'm supposed to be with, then I'm going to treasure that. And that's going to come with all kinds of stuff, just like I know I come with all kinds of stuff. So it just opened up the atmosphere so much, and it immediately lost its power over Jacob. Like, you immediately stopped struggling with that thing as much as you had been. It was a huge blow to the enemy. And when we kind of put all those pieces together and recognized it, we were like, whoa, 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 we have discovered something. The new level
let's
has been
trace this thing back
unlocked.
to the source.
Like, yeah, exactly. And so then we just started doing that with everything. Any bit of time that we got hit with some anxiety about
Like,
something or
anything
torment,
that was like, I don't want to talk to you about it.
That's
Like, oh, you don't want to talk about it. Okay, let's write that thing down. Okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. It became the big shiny beacon of light.
Squirm, enemy, squirm.
Yeah, and I've done that with my friends. I've done that with family members that are close to me that are like, they really don't want to tell them. They're embarrassed, whatever. And I don't go into the whole story, but I just know in my head, like, hey, this thing's going to feel a lot better if you just tell me what it is. And so that has been huge. And I've seen that in my Christian friends' lives as well. Like, just release that burden, let the devil stop tormenting you over it, and share it with someone safe and trusted. So,
and I just had a thought that crossed my mind is, maybe not in all things, but you should be sharing with your spouse first. Right.
In some certain circumstances, you only share with your spouse.
Well, exactly. Right. Because there are definitely some. But I think like just in general, it's talking to your guy friends or talking to your girlfriends, right? Whatever have you, before you talk to your spouse, right? That can go into the whole, some of the other discussions that we've had, right? In regards to communication, things like that. They should be God's your first line of defense.
Yeah.
And your spouse is your second, right? Your spouse should be the first person you talk to. Always, in some cases, the only person that you talk to about certain things.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is your spouse should know about things before your friends do.
Oh yeah.
But your spouse shouldn't be finding out about those things from the friends, right?
Good.
Right, because then that starts breeding into a whole bunch of other garbage, right? So if that's happening, take note of that, right?
Yeah,
and that's something that you need to guys talk about, right?
That's a good point.
Because that leads into all the other things that we talked about in some of our previous episodes.
You know what's funny about that though is that there's times that you have told things to other people before me, but not like important, not like deep dark secret kind of things. My mom, like, there are so many times that, like, okay, my mom is like a corporate guru genius. Okay. So we get a lot of like life career kind of advice from her. And so there have been times that we've been at like a family get together or whatever that Jacob has told her some kind of update with his job or like some conversation that he had with his boss or something.
Like, I didn't know that.
And so he's talking to her about it and I'm finding out for the first time, like, through this conversation of him to my mom.
Now, granted, we have a lot of moments where it's like, I thought I talked to you about that. And then she's like, oh, maybe I told my sister or my mom. And I'm like, oh, maybe I told one of my friends that, or I told one of my friends, close coworkers, about that. I'm like, oh, I thought I did tell you about that. But
it's just so funny. So we're not talking about that kind of trivial stuff. I mean, although if you can, you should make that a priority as well. But we're talking specifically more private, deep, dark type of things. Or just things that you're sensitive about.
Yeah, or just in general, because privacy, right, doesn't have to be just the dark, nasty whatevers, and then all those things that pop into your head, or everything is just open communication, right? But
setting that practice and that habit that your spouse is the first person you go to with information.
Right. So your spouse is the first person to go to with information. You're not going to hide anything from them intentionally, unintentionally. If something comes up that you feel prompted that you shouldn't share, then it's probably something you should share, right? Not just should, but must. And then the last bit there is privacy in all areas.
What do you mean?
Depending on the nature of things, privacy in your job, privacy with your friends, privacy with your finances. So you pick and choose the different things that you're going to share with your spouse to a degree, depending on if you can. What I meant by that is, like, in this area, there are some of the jobs that people have they can't really discuss. Client privilege, or maybe you've got a security clearance, things like that, right? So I'm not saying that you just go and talk to your spouse about all the details and things of like that. So there are some things that you have to have. If you're legally obligated to have privacy, make sure to be reserved about that, and don't violate.
But I will say
the law.
You know what I will say though, even with regard to that, you still have to find a way to tell your spouse what's going on.
There are aspects of my job that I can't tell you.
Right, exactly. And I've seen other people who have jobs that are like certain levels of the military, or like, let's say they're like a special ops type of military person, or I had a friend that worked very close to the Secretary of Defense at one time in their life, and there was lots of things that they couldn't talk to their spouse about. And we live in the DC area, so there's lots of our friends that have jobs that we can't really talk about what they work on. But that doesn't mean that you have to never speak about your job. I think it's incredibly important, because you can't talk about your job, that you find ways to talk about your job.
Well, especially if like the stuff that has been going on at my job currently, right?
Right,
With the whole with some of my management stuff and the stuff that's been frustrating me, right?
Right. So Jacob has
I don't
found
want
a
to be
way.
private about that.
Right. Jacob, it's a frustration point. And there are so many times in the history of our marriage that he has found ways to like make analogies for the things that he works on. It's like, okay, so it's kind of like a this and a that. I'm not going to think of one right now, but he'll make an analogy that's similar to something about his job without telling me what it is, so that I can just better understand the framework of what the problem is that he's dealing with, so that I can then help to kind of give him the best advice, or just at least just understand his point of view, where he's coming from. So even if you have like the most top security clearance job or something in the world, you can still find a way to tell your spouse, like, yeah, like today was hard. And I was just like really frustrated by some people that I work with. And it was just really difficult to kind of manage myself and how I was feeling. And I felt like I was kind of boxed in by my boss. And
Yeah, because what they're doing is impacting our project schedules, right? And you
or
can
even if you just are totally vague, it's the root and the heart of what's coming across is, hey, I'm frustrated. Hey, I'm stressed. Hey, this project's coming up and I'm feeling a little under pressure. Like it's important to keep that transparency and openness and honesty with your spouse, because it doesn't, at the end of the day, it actually doesn't matter what the details are. It matters about how that's impacting your spouse. And then as that person's partner, how can you help them? How does that impact
right.
you?
How are you going to work as a team?
Right.
Right. Because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you're arming your spouse with, they didn't even know you had an awful day today, and you come home and then, you have a fight and you blow up. And it's like, well, why did that happen? Well, if you had not kept it to yourself and actually come home and be like, okay, I'm really upset right now because,
you know what?
blah, 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 blah.
And that's just good. That's just good advice. I'm thinking right now, like we went down the security thing. I meant that as like even if you have a job where you can't talk about it, you can still talk about it. But yes, Jacob, you are correct. The main point of it is you need to just talk about your day. You need to talk about your job. You need to talk about how you're feeling. You need to keep that.
Ties back to communication.
I was just about to
go listen to the previous episode. Yeah, tag here.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, but then also, I think, and I touched on it briefly, is the privacy and the finances. Right? If you're going to if you're going to be a team and you're be working together on things, and you're not hiding anything from anybody, emotionally, there's nothing in the closet kind of stuff, there should also be nothing financially hidden either, right?
So true.
There is no privacy there. You cannot have privacy there. Now, granted, like I had a bank account that I created specifically so that I could say, okay, I need a budget for something like that. I was saving up.
This is a good story.
So I was saving up so that we could have a really nice engagement weekend, and I was also including a whole bunch
anniversary
weekend. Sorry,
it was our 5-year anniversary.
The 5-year anniversary weekend, right? So I was including a ring, and I wanted to do like Uber limo and nights at a hotel and a bunch of fancy restaurants. So I was like adding all these things up. And I planned all these things out. I'm like, hey, for the next couple paychecks, I want to save up something because it was.
No, but here's the thing. But this is the thing. You came to me ahead of time and you said like, this is the number I want to spend. Like, can we figure out a plan to work together to set aside this money and to save it? Because I would like to make our anniversary special.
But and I didn't want you to see any of the charges, because then that would ruin the surprise.
Right, exactly.
So that's an example of
openness, honesty.
We were open and honest in what was going to be, right? She had trust. Like, I know that he's not going to blow the money on something stupid, and I know that he's trying to do something.
And also, listen, it's an anniversary gift. So our anniversary rolls around and he doesn't do anything that's worth X
I'm
amount
in
of dollars.
lots of trouble.
Right?
You might not hear from me.
No, but that's perfect. That's a perfect example, because it's not like, hey, babe, I want to plan something special for our anniversary. I'm going to put aside some money in this other account for a while. Okay, that's different than, hey, I'd like to purposely save $1,200. Can we make a plan of how to save $1,200 over the next X months or X paychecks or whatever, so I can make our anniversary really special? Because the ambiguous, I don't know how much it's going to be, then he could take you on, a weekend away, that you're like, you don't actually know how much he was saving. So it does create...
Wait a minute, $2,000 went to you, but this feels like a $100 weekend.
Exactly. And it creates... And so we're not saying that don't trust your spouse. I'm just saying that if you're not open and honest about that stuff, it creates a doorway for the enemy to use to get in places.
Create that wedge.
And honestly, at the end of the day, you guys are going to hear us talk so much in this podcast that the root of it all either comes back to Christ, or it comes back to not allowing the enemy to have an open door or a foothold or a way to wiggle his way into your life and cause chaos somewhere. Because marriage is a godly institution, and the devil is working actively to tear down the institution of marriage, make it just defiled in our world that we live in right now. And so you should not allow any place in your marriage for the enemy to come in and create any of that division. And even something as simple as, you guys might think that we're like over the top, but even something as simple as, hey, I'm planning on spending $3,000 6 months from now versus, hey, I want to set aside some money. You might think that is a little too specific, but I say, I trust my husband with my life, but I still do not want to let the enemy have any foothold. And so I'm going to have that conversation with him, and he's going to have that conversation with me, so that we know exactly what we're going to get into, at least in some aspect, as we're planning that out.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that up.
That's a really great thing. Yeah. That's a great situation, because I kind of forgot about that, but it's a really good point to bring up.
Yeah.
And just to end on that note, is that Matthew 19, verse 6 says, since they are no longer two, but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. This is a verse about marriage. Some translations say, let no thing split apart or tear apart what God has brought together.
And it comes right back to what you said, right?
Yeah.
It's not giving the enemy a foothold. It's not letting him have a wedge that he can drive in and make cracks and then expand to bigger problems, bigger sins, things like that.
Exactly. And if the Bible specifically says, hey, God has joined these things together and let nothing or no one tear them apart, that's not necessarily a decree of protection of like God saying nothing is going to tear you apart and no thing is going to tear you apart.
But when you keep everything private, you're building a wall. You are purposefully building something that will keep you apart.
And even if it's like the smallest thing, even like 1 or 2 grains of sand can shift the foundation of an entire building. So what I'm saying is that you have to make sure that no thing is going to tear you apart. You need to make sure that no one is going to tear apart your marriage, what God has joined together. God is our protection first and foremost, and he is our covering. But we also can be sure that we're paying attention to our foundation. We're shoring up our walls with prayer. Like, we are the watchman on the wall, making sure that nothing is going to attack our marriage. And if something has found its way in, we are going to break that thing off with the power of the Lord with us. So it's more, in my mind, Matthew 19:6 is more of a charge onto us as married people than it is a declarative statement of like, nothing's going to happen to you because God said so.
Yeah, don't let anything stay. Don't let anything in. Don't let it stay.
Yeah, don't let it fester, to continue on from our conversation last week about communication. Yeah, so I just hope that touches and blesses you guys in a way that makes sense to you, and that you can use it. If you have any questions about this particular topic, like, I would love, if this episode's up on YouTube, then you can head to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@the7fold, and you can find our Radical Direction podcast list there, and you can drop a comment and ask us your questions when it comes to transparency and openness and honesty. If this is on the audio version, please send us an email. You can always email us, connect@the7fold.com. That is our ministry email. Anyone can email us at any time. We're happy to answer those questions. And if you guys have a bunch of questions about transparency, privacy, openness, any of that kind of stuff, then we can do a whole Q&A episode just answering those questions. So that would be great as well.
It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you all.
I hope that you guys find some ways to improve your communication, your transparency, and your honesty in your marriage.
And continue to live radical.
Go live radical, guys.
Woo!
Bye.
Bye.
This episode has been made possible by our generous viewers and audience members just like you. If you'd like to donate to the show to keep our ministry running and growing, producing more shows just like this one, please head to the7fold.com/partners to donate there. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Radical Direction. Until next time, go live radical.